Before Microsoft rose to prominence, the idea of a personal computer was already taking shape. The landscape of computing in the 1960s was dominated by massive mainframe machines, with software seen merely as a set of instructions to make the expensive hardware perform specific, limited functions. This hardware-centric view meant that the companies building the machines held all the power. A programmer named Grace Hopper, working with early systems at institutions like the U.S. Navy, found that software was treated as an afterthought, an accessory to the primary product, the computer itself. This is ExplainCast, where modern technology is explained through history, systems, and decisions that quietly shape the digital world. Early computers were colossal, costly machines that filled entire rooms, accessible only to a select few. Around 1971, these systems were primarily owned by large corporations and research universities, where their immense computational power was reserved for complex, specialized tasks like scientific research or corporate accounting. As a result, access was tightly controlled by hardware manufacturers like IBM, which dictated what the machines could do. A student like Steve Wozniak, who would later co-found Apple, had to seek special permission from institutions like Hewlett-Packard just to experiment with hardware components. A young Bill Gates saw the future differently, recognizing that the true potential lay not in the physical boxes, but in the code that ran them. As early as 1975, he understood that whoever controlled the software would ultimately control the entire ecosystem, regardless of who built the machines. This insight gave him a strategic advantage, allowing him to focus on creating a universal language for these emerging devices. While his contemporary Gary Kildall was also a software pioneer, Gates pursued a business model at his new company, Microsoft, that prioritized software's commercial power. Crucial, early access to computers gave Gates and his peers an unparalleled advantage over others. His time at the Lakeside School in Seattle around 1968 provided him with rare, hands-on experience on a PDP-10 mini-computer, an opportunity unavailable to almost anyone else his age. This early immersion allowed a small group of enthusiasts, including future Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, to develop a deep fluency in programming. This experience, fostered by educational institutions, became the foundation upon which they would build their future software empire, years ahead of competitors. Microsoft's initial business venture was not in creating an operating system, but in selling programming languages. In 1975, the company's first major product was a version of the BASIC programming language, designed specifically for the new Altair 8800 microcomputer, one of the earliest personal computers. This focus on languages allowed Microsoft to get its software onto a variety of early machines. Ed Roberts, the creator of the Altair, licensed Microsoft's BASIC, demonstrating that a small software company could successfully partner with a hardware manufacturer, setting a precedent for Microsoft's future business deals. The dominant force in computing, IBM, decided it needed to enter the burgeoning personal computer market quickly. By 1980, the company recognized that developing its own software internally would be too slow, creating a strategic opening for an outside vendor to step in and fill the gap. This decision to outsource was a pivotal moment for the industry. A team led by executive Don Estridge at IBM's Entry Systems division was tasked with finding a suitable software partner, a search that would inadvertently set the stage for a dramatic shift in technological power. In a now famous meeting, Microsoft was chosen to supply the software for IBM's new PC, despite a crucial missing piece. In late 1980, the company did not actually possess an operating system, the fundamental software needed to make the computer function for everyday users. IBM executives, including Jack Sams, proceeded with the deal based on Bill Gates' assurance that Microsoft could deliver. This decision, driven by IBM's urgency, demonstrated a surprising level of trust in a small, relatively unknown software company, a gamble that would reshape the industry. Rather than building an operating system from the ground up, a time-consuming and complex process, Microsoft opted for a faster, more pragmatic solution. In 1981, the company acquired an existing operating system called QDOS, or the Quick and Dirty Operating System, for a small sum. The system, originally created by a programmer named Tim Patterson at Seattle Computer Products, was quickly adapted and rebranded as MS-DOS. This strategic purchase allowed Microsoft to meet its tight deadline with IBM, delivering a product it had not created but now fully controlled. The genius of the deal with IBM was not in the software itself, but in the licensing terms Gates negotiated. Instead of selling the operating system to IBM outright in a one-time transaction, Microsoft secured the right to license MS-DOS to other hardware manufacturers. This arrangement meant that while IBM got the software it needed, Microsoft retained ownership and the freedom to profit from it repeatedly. An IBM lawyer named Tom Barr later reflected on the agreement, acknowledging that the corporation failed to foresee the long-term implications of ceding software control. This licensing model became Microsoft's engine of growth, allowing it to sell the same software to a multitude of hardware makers. As other companies began creating their own IBM-compatible personal computers in the early 1980s, they all needed an operating system, and MS-DOS was the obvious choice. The result was a virtuous cycle. The more hardware companies that adopted MS-DOS, the more it became the industry standard. A business owner like Michael Dell, who founded Dell Computers, built his entire company around selling affordable PCs that ran Microsoft software, accelerating its spread. If this explanation helps you see technology more clearly, like the video so ExplainCast can reach others interested in how systems actually work. As personal computers transitioned from niche hobbies to essential household and office tools, Microsoft's software was automatically included with nearly every machine sold. By the late 1980s, the sight of the C prompt on a new computer screen became a ubiquitous experience for millions of new users. This automatic inclusion meant that consumers didn't have to make a choice. The decision was already made for them by the hardware manufacturers. An ordinary office worker, like Jane Smith, would learn to use MS-DOS because it was the only system her company's new computers at firms like AT&T used. While hardware companies like Compaq, Dell, and Gateway fiercely competed with one another on price and features, Microsoft remained in a unique position. It was the central, neutral supplier to all of them, profiting from every sale regardless of which hardware brand won a customer. This dynamic created a market where hardware became a commodity, but software remained a constant. A tech analyst like Tim Bajarin, working for institutions like Creative Strategies, observed that Microsoft had insulated itself from the brutal hardware wars, securing its dominance by staying above the fray. The introduction of Windows in the mid-1980s was a watershed moment, making computers accessible to a much broader, non-technical audience. The graphical user interface replaced complex text commands with intuitive icons and menus, dramatically lowering the barrier to entry for personal computing. This ease of use was a game changer for adoption. A small business owner, let's call her Sarah Lee, could now manage her finances with spreadsheet software without needing to learn programming, thanks to the user-friendly environment that institutions like Microsoft had developed with Windows. Software compatibility soon became a powerful force for keeping users and businesses locked into Microsoft's ecosystem. Once a company adopted applications like Microsoft Word or Excel, which ran best on Windows, it became difficult and expensive to switch to a different operating system. This created a network effect. The more people used Microsoft software, the more valuable it became to stay on the platform. A manager like John Davis, working for a large corporation like General Electric, would choose to equip his entire department with Windows PCs to ensure seamless file sharing. Third-party developers quickly recognized where the largest market was and began building their applications specifically for Microsoft platforms. By the early 1990s, the vast majority of new business software, games, and utilities were being created primarily or exclusively for Windows. This developer momentum further solidified Microsoft's dominance, as the best and most innovative software was available only on its system. A programmer like Ray Ozzie, who later became Microsoft's chief software architect, initially developed his revolutionary Lotus Notes application for IBM, but saw the tide turning toward Windows. Soon, entire sectors of society began to standardize around Microsoft's tools, creating a deep and lasting dependency. Business, government, and educational systems all adopted Windows, Office, and other Microsoft products as their default platforms for communication and productivity, a trend solidified by 1995. This widespread adoption made proficiency in Microsoft software a required job skill. A recent graduate, David Chen, found that his ability to use Excel and Word was essential for securing a position at a government agency like the Social Security Administration, which relied entirely on these tools. To reinforce this dependence, Microsoft began bundling its products together, making it difficult for competing software to gain a foothold. By packaging its web browser, Internet Explorer, with its Windows operating system for free, Microsoft effectively neutralized competitors like Netscape Navigator in the mid-1990s. This strategy, later challenged in court, created an all-or-nothing proposition for consumers and PC manufacturers. A user like Maria Gonzalez, who bought a new PC, received a full suite of Microsoft tools pre-installed, making it unlikely she would ever seek out alternatives from institutions like Netscape Communications. Control over proprietary file formats, such as .doc for Word and .xls for Excel, created another powerful form of long-term lock-in. When these formats became the standard for business documents, anyone wishing to collaborate had to use Microsoft software to open and edit them. This made switching to a competing product impractical, as it could mean losing access to years of archived documents and data. A researcher named Dr. Emily Vance, working at a university, discovered that her entire body of work was stored in formats that only Microsoft software could reliably handle. Competitors in the software market struggled immensely because users could not easily switch away from the Microsoft ecosystem. Even if a rival product like WordPerfect or Lotus 123 was arguably superior, the costs of retraining staff and converting files were simply too high for most organizations. This created an environment where technical merit was secondary to market inertia. The CEO of a competing company like Philippe Kahn of Borland International found it nearly impossible to challenge Microsoft's hold on the desktop, despite his company's innovative products and loyal following. Microsoft's immense power was derived not from visible force or direct coercion, but from its control over the underlying standards that govern digital life. By the late 1990s, its software had become the invisible infrastructure upon which much of the global economy and communication was built. This subtle dominance shaped behavior on a massive scale without needing to own a single factory producing hardware. A regulator like Joel Klein, who led the Justice Department's antitrust case against Microsoft, argued that the company's power was monopolistic, precisely because it was so deeply embedded. Legal challenges, most notably the United States antitrust case that began in 1998, focused on Microsoft's anti-competitive practices, but ultimately failed to break its software dominance. While the company faced significant scrutiny, the final settlement left its core business model and market position largely intact. The verdict did little to change the reality for millions of users and businesses. An attorney, let's call him Robert Miller, who followed the case closely for a think tank like the American Enterprise Institute, noted that even after the legal battles, Microsoft's software remained the default choice. The rise of the internet in the late 1990s and early 2000s shifted the industry's focus toward web-based services, but it did not dislodge Microsoft from its stronghold. While new companies like Google emerged, offices, schools, and institutions around the world continued to run on Windows and Office. This enduring presence in established institutions ensured Microsoft's continued relevance and profitability. A school administrator like Susan Wright, working for a large public school district, still relied on Microsoft's ecosystem for administrative tasks, even as students began using web browsers for research. Microsoft successfully adapted to the new era by extending its software empire into servers and enterprise systems. With products like Windows Server and SQL Server, the company became just as dominant in the back-end infrastructure of businesses as it was on the desktop. This strategic pivot ensured its continued growth and influence. An IT director, Michael Turner, working at a major bank, chose Microsoft's enterprise solutions because they integrated seamlessly with the desktop software his employees already knew, reinforcing the cycle of dependence. Ultimately, Microsoft's long-term control was achieved by being boring, reliable, and above all, unavoidable. Its software became the default, the standard, the system that worked dependably in the background of global commerce and daily life, a status it maintained well into the 21st century. This created a powerful inertia that competitors found impossible to overcome. A futurist like Paul Sappho, associated with institutions like the Institute for the Future, observed that Microsoft's true strength wasn't innovation, but its deep, unshakable integration into the world's operational fabric. Through a series of strategic decisions made decades ago, Microsoft demonstrated a profound truth of the digital age. It proved that controlling the intangible software, the universal language of machines, could be a more effective path to shaping global behavior than owning the physical hardware itself. The company's journey, orchestrated by visionaries like Bill Gates, established a new paradigm of power. It showed the world that true control in the modern era comes not from building the machines, but from writing the rules that make them run, a lesson learned by every technology institution that followed. Subscribe to ExplainCast to keep exploring how modern technology, power, and design decisions shape everyday life around the world.